الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول كريم. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. اللهم إنا نسألك خير كله عاجله وآجله ما علمنا منه ما لم نعلم، ونعوذ بشر كله عاجله وآجله ما علمنا منه ما لم نعلم. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلق محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. أما بعد، فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وذكر فإن ذكرى تنفع المؤمنين. صدق الله العظيم. وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام: حافظوا للصلوات والصلاة الوسطى. صدق الله العظيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Dear elders and brothers, inshallah, today and for the next few days, the time that we have after Asr into Maghrib, looking at the audience that we have as far as young people and some students, some professionals, I thought it'd be appropriate to go through some of the fundamentals of deen. Yesterday we covered some of the basics of taharat. That was at a request from some of the brothers here. But the next few days, at least the next 3, 4, 5 days, I wanted to cover some basics about our deen which may be a cause for doubts for some people. And I'm referring specifically to the kids that are going to colleges, and especially in the age of the internet, where the search engine is a primary source of information for a lot of people. And it may be correct information, it may be misinformation. So I just wanted to touch upon a few things which many of not only our youth but even some of our elders, they may have some questions and doubts about. And specifically we're talking about the authenticity of the Quran, the authenticity of the hadith, the narration of the hadith, and the value of the hadith. And then from there we'll get to some other important questions which are a foundation for our deen. Then into the specifics, as we went through yesterday, as far as taharat, there may be some other masail as far as business, as far as marriage and divorce. These are important things. And if we get time, inshallah, at the end, we will touch upon some of the important rulings that cover these aspects of our lives, which are important in our day-to-day life. But I just wanted to take the first few days to touch on the foundation of our deen. So if you allow me, inshallah, we'll have we'll talk for until 8 o'clock. This is yesterday we discussed the schedule. Inshallah, until 8 we'll continue a one-way discussion. And then if you have questions in between, I would ask, inshallah, you can raise your hands and we'll give you a paper and pencil. You can write your questions. Then later on at the end, after 8, maybe 8:05, we'll discuss some of those questions in detail. But I would ask you hold your questions until till the end. So let's start from the basics. If you put a timeline, I don't know if you've seen one of those posters made by NASA. They have a picture of the galaxies. Actually, suppose the whole universe, but just a part of that, they have the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, and they have an arrow, to our solar system. You can't even see anything, just a little dot, and it says you are here. And it really tells you, gives you a picture of who we are. We sometimes, in our day-to-day life, in our professional lives, and as we get older, as we get more established, we tend to get arrogant, and we tend to think that we are something. But in the actual reality of things, in the actual passage of time, one person who's born on this planet, stays for a few years, and then he leaves, in reality, it's really nothing. When you actually look at the passage of time, before they used to estimate the universe was 4.5, maybe 5 billion years. Now some new research coming out, maybe 13.8 or whatever billions of years ago. But it's billions. It's in the billions. So within a period of billions, if you really look at it, we're down to a very insignificant amount of time where we as individuals are on this planet. I'm not even talking about human life. I'm talking about me as one person. One person was born at this age, at this year, and then will die at this date. So this passage of time, average as Qadm al-Hadith, 60, 70 years, it's really insignificant when you look at the reality of the whole universe. It's really nothing. One person came and went. Just as millions of flies, trillions of flies are here. One fly is born, one fly dies. Millions of cattle, goats, and sheep and chickens, they come and they go. So who am I? When somebody really examines his place on this earth, look at the broader picture, and then we come to me today in July 9th, 2015. So I want to get from there and then come to today. So if we look at the broader picture, we see how did this world come into existence? Where was this before? If you just 13.8, go back 14 billion, go back 20 billion, go back a trillion, quadrillion years, what was there? Nothing. And that's where we begin. We begin with Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one and only truth that actually exists in the universe today. And how we get to that is the foundation. I wanted to take a few minutes. I don't want to take too much time, but this is sometimes a relevant beginning for a lot of the youngsters in the sense that, how do I know that there is a God? We're sitting in a masjid in the month of Ramadan. MashaAllah, many of you are doing itikaf, and MashaAllah, many of you are fasting and you're reading Quran. And some of it may be cultural, some of it may be pressure from the family. Okay, nothing better to do, school is off, okay, let's go to the masjid. But until you have a solid foundation, you will be tested. Tested in the sense that, especially those, many of us, we have a sheltered life, which is good for a certain, to a certain extent. That we surround ourselves with Muslims and we surround ourselves with people with a similar mindset. But living in a country which is not a Muslim country, and actually now exposed to a lot of thoughts, especially through the internet, there's many different ways of life and ways of thinking that we're exposed to. So until we have a solid intellectual foundation of who we are and why we believe in what we're doing, it will cause doubts. And those doubts may be displayed in different manners throughout our lives. And that's why some people, I'm not just talking about somebody saying, I don't believe in Islam, or I don't believe in Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We're talking about even later on, where did they get this hadith? Or, it was just a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ really say this. Doubts such as that, and they come out, and then that affects our day-to-day life. So the foundation of that is there is a creator. There's nothing there. There is a creator. There is a universe. That we see, that's something tangible that we can touch. That's something tangible that we can prove through our senses. That there is, a sun, that there is, some planets, that there is this building, that there is this table, there is a phone, there is a microphone. You can hear something, you can touch something. So something came out of nothing. This laptop was not existent before it was made. Someone made it. Some company made it, some person made it, but it was made. So similarly, the whole world was made. So we, as a proof that how do we know that Allah made it as our foundation for our belief that there is one creator as compared to the other thoughts, there is 3 in 1, 1 in 3, or there's hundreds of gods, and there are many different ways of thinking. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in one of the key themes throughout the Quran, He points to Tawheed. Tawheed means the oneness of God. There's only one creator. And He proves Himself throughout the Quran through His signs. An ayat with the Quran literally means a sign. Just, reading through Yasin, mashallah, especially the ones that are here in itikaf, and we should at home read through Yasin every day. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wa ayatul lahumul ardul mayta. Ayah. An ayat of the Quran, we say it's a verse of the Quran. But ayat literally means a sign. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is introducing Himself. A sign for you of the existence of a creator is ardul mayta. Ard, earth. The English word earth actually comes from the Arabic word ard in the Quran. There's many English words that comes from Arabic words. This is one of them. So one of the proofs of the existence of Allah is that you look at outside, the earth, dirt. From that dead earth, it's inanimate. It's not living. But from that dead earth, أرض الميتة أحييناها وخرجنا منها حبا. From that dead earth, we see things coming out of the ground. So how do different things of different tastes, of different textures, different colors, come out of the same ground, fed by the same water? That's a proof that someone is planning. Someone is designing something. Just as, our planet just happens to be 93 point whatever million miles away from a medium-sized star, it's not an accident. It just happens to be tilted at a certain degree, at the tilt of the axis, it is not an accident. Someone has planned it. It's just as, mashallah, many of your brothers that are here locally, they see this masjid, mashallah, it's been here for a couple of years now, but before it started, 2010, 11, 2009, if you remember passing through North Avenue and Swift Road, there's nothing here, right? So now if I told you then, let's say in 2009, we told somebody, look, that, in 2015, there'll be a building here, we'll have minars, and it'll have windows, and it'll have this, they may believe you. But if you told them that in the next day, let's say you met them on a Friday and said by Saturday, next day there'll be a building with this big structure and this minars, will they believe you? If you told them, so one day something's going to happen? No, probably not. Because intellectually, we think that it takes a process to make something. And the more complex something is, the more time it takes. So this building is complex compared to maybe like a shed that we may have in our backyard. It may take a few hours, you put something together, you can have something. Or make a table, you put some planks of wood, you can make something. That's compared to a phone, it's more complex. It's compared to a laptop, more complex. So the fact a creation points to the Creator. That's why our elders, they give an example that, let's say you're in the middle of a desert. Those old cartoons, where you have this all desert and you're walking, and all of a sudden you see footprints. So what do the footprints in the sand tell you? Any guess? Somebody was there, exactly. It may be you actually may be walking around in circles, but at least it was somebody. The footprints did not come about by themselves. So similarly, this building did not come about by itself. This phone did not come about by itself. This this booklet, this box, this piece of paper, everything came from somewhere. So when we say that this planet just happens to arise out of nowhere, that should raise some red flags in our minds. If something says it just happens, it was an accident. The idea of the Big Bang theory, that it just happened through a series of chances, it just happened. So that's the first proof. And you can go on to many of these. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout His book, He's telling us, وَآيَةٌ لَهُمُ اللَّيْلِ. The coming of the day and night is a sign that there is a Creator. It's so precise. Inshallah, Maghrib will be what? 8:31? I forgot what it is. 8:32, whatever it is today. So on July 9th, 2015, Maghrib is at, let's say, 8:30. So can anyone guess when Maghrib was at July 9th, 2014? Any guesses? 8:30. Can anyone guess what Maghrib was 10 years from now, the same date? 8:30. How does the sun know that it has to come out and it has to set at a certain time? The precision when it comes out nowadays, we have the calculation. I'm not going to touch on the whole fact of, moon calculation or moon sighting. That's a whole different story. But the fact that the sun does come out at a certain time points to the fact that there is certain precision in the world around us. We know that a hydrogen atom, has one proton, and one electron, and the oxygen has 16, the protons and the neutrons. We can analyze this. We can quantify these things. We know that gold has certain properties, silver has certain properties, magnesium, mercury has all these different properties. So there is certain order to the world around us. So that proves that there is a Creator. So that's the foundation I want to begin from. I don't want to take too much time. I'm sure many of you know that, but that's where I want to begin from there. If that foundation is weak, then what you build upon is going to be weaker. If you have questions later on, inshallah, we can discuss them written, or inshallah afterwards you can ask me personally. But that's the foundation we need to start from. That there is a Creator. So now the next question is, why? Why did this Creator create me? And the whole broader system, why did the Creator create the universe? So that's where we have a communication from the Creator to the created. This is something unique in this system that we have. Just as a computer programmer can program the laptop to do certain things. We instruct them, when you write the code, we're instructing them to do certain things. When you make an app, the manufacturer of the app is telling the app to do certain functions. So similarly, our Creator wants us to do certain things. And if we live our life in a manner in which that Creator wants to do certain things, then it's beneficial for us. Not necessarily for the Creator. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not benefit from our prayers. He does not benefit from our zakat or our hajj. He's free from all these needs. But we as a creation, if you think yourself as a creation, as a machine, as something that is made, it's just like a car. If some of these cars, I know we had a Dodge Caravan back a few years back. The Dodge Caravan takes the, what's it called? E85, the ethanol additive they put in cars. But some cars don't take the ethanol additives. So if you go to the gas station right here, you have this one stall, especially for the E. It says the E85. It has. So certain engines are made to take that type of gasoline, and some engines are not. If you put the wrong gasoline in the wrong car, the car is not going to function. Or it may for a while, but then something's going to happen. So the point is, if we follow the instructions of the manufacturer, the product will function better. So we, as just been explained, we are a product. We are something that has been manufactured. We are something that has been made. So now we need to find out how I can live my life so that I can function better. So throughout time, and this is one of the wisdoms of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also one of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that since He created man, He did not leave him alone to wander by himself and to think and to conjecture and to
and to theorize, okay, maybe I should eat this. Maybe this is okay for me to eat. Maybe I can eat pig. Maybe I can drink some alcohol. Maybe I can have more than one wife. Maybe I can wear shorts. Maybe I can do this and that. These are just examples off the top of my head that we think just as today. There's a big decision made by the Supreme Court last week. I don't want to bring it up here, but those who know, that's a very, how can you say, historical shift in the way where this country is going. And that's all made on what we are thinking. I think this is okay. I think this is okay. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as our creator, as our manufacturer, is telling us, this is what I want you to do. So since the time of our creation, and this one you look at from billions of years ago to maybe millions of years where this planet came into existence, and then throughout wherever you want, the recorded history is only a few thousands of years old. Maybe 10,000, maybe 12,000. So since the beginning of that time, so from there, billions and millions, we're coming down to a few thousands of years. So since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Adam alayhi salam to this earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also sent him a manual, sent him a way he taught him how to live his life. That's why Adam alayhi salam was not only the first human, he was also the first prophet. So anyone that came after him, he could say, can I eat this? Can I do this sort of business? Can I, just as we discussed earlier, how can I go to the washroom in this way? Can I clean myself this way? What happens, if this happens? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent instruction with people throughout times. وَلِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ هَادٍ. This is the rule Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent in the Quran, that throughout the time, in every nation, there was a guide. That's why, we know the names of about 25 different prophets that are mentioned in the Quran. But that doesn't mean we're limited to those. There were, according to one riwayat, 150,000, another riwayat, 200,000, prophets that came throughout time. If this place, this continent that we live in, North America, even South America, they say the Indians that came when Columbus was here, they came through the Bering Strait, through Russia. But let's say they were here before, during the time of Prophet Muhammad. If they were here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a messenger for them. People in China, in the islands of Indonesia, in Australia, wherever they were, if someone was there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have sent a guide for them. So now all this continued, from the prophets, from Adam alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Sulaiman alayhi salam, Dawood alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, until Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Then something very important happened. Something that caused a paradigm shift in what had happened up till that time. Thousands of years had passed to Adam alayhi salam, till the coming of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. In those thousands of years, wherever someone lived, whether you lived in Jordan, you lived in the northern Saudi Peninsula, if you lived in Egypt, if you lived in Pakistan, if you lived in India, if you lived in China, if you lived in Europe, wherever someone was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a prophet for their guidance. So if they had questions, they would go to him. People at the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam would go to him. First of all, they'd have to accept him. And that's a whole different story. Some people, they rejected their prophets. But let's assume that after they accepted them, then they would go to them for guidance. And that's why we have, in the Quran, the whole story of the Musa alayhi salam, the beginning of the Quran, Surah Baqarah, with قُلْتُمْ وَإِذْ فَعَلْنَا وَإِذْ رَفَعْنَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, look, we did this for you. We did this for you. And the Musa alayhi salam, they asked him this, how do you do this? How do we do that? But when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came, something very different happened. What happened is that series of teachers that came for different nations, that stopped. So now, from that time to the coming of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, till the end of time, no more prophet is coming. These may be fundamental things for a lot of us, but I want to be explicit because that's building a foundation for what's coming up later on. The Prophet ﷺ was the last and final messenger. So now the question arises, okay, Prophet ﷺ was in Mecca or in Medina, 1400 years ago. So what about Chicago? What about New York? What about Toronto? What about Mexico City? What about Rio de Janeiro? What about, Brazil, China, Africa? What about all these places? How are they supposed to be guided? How are they supposed to learn what to do? As the first question that we ask, okay, I know there is a creator, although what does he want from me? What am I supposed to do? So let's say there is a youngster living in the mountains of Chile. And now he looks at the stars at night and he says, look, Rabbana ma khalaqta hadha batila. This Ibrahim alayhi salam said, that there's a controller, there's a maker. So now what am I supposed to do? So now that's where we have wahi. And that's the foundation of what I was getting up to. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connected to the people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to talk and communicate to the people. And how does He communicate to the people? Through wahi. Wahi is the communication of the creator with the created. And during the time of the prophets, there was wahi, there's different types of wahis. One way is that we know of, the first very famous coming of Jibreel alayhi salam when he came to the mountain in Ghar Hira, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent angels, specifically Jibreel alayhi salam, and he would talk to the prophet. Angels would not talk to everybody on the street. He would talk to that specific someone, that special chosen person, the prophet, and he would tell him that, look, you tell them this is what God wants from you. So this was the liaison, this was the connecting between the creator and the created. So now, because that chain of transmissions has ended, so now the question is, how can I benefit? What is my reference for, okay, what can I wear? Who can I marry? How can I run a business? These are questions that I need to ask today. How can I raise my children? How can we do this? How can we do that? So in order to answer these questions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had the guidance sent for us. So that guidance, the ulama ikram, they give us certain guidelines. The first guideline is the Quran. That, as we know, I'm just going to get to the foundation of the authenticity of the Quran. Specifically, today's session is on this. Is that the main communication for humans till the end of time is the Quran, is the book that we have here. And then after that we have hadith, inshallah maybe we'll get to that tomorrow, and then we have ijma', and then we have other things that come from that, and those are important things which come later on. But what I wanted to address today is that there are some people that create doubts onto the authenticity of the Quran. The book we have today, some people say, it was changed. Hazrat Usman radiallahu anhu burnt the Quran. The vowels that we have on the Quran, the Fatha, Kasra, Dhamma, they weren't there in the time of Prophet. What is it? This is bid'ah. So they raise questions about this. And unless you have a solid foundation as to how this Quran came into existence and what we have today, there may be doubts that come to you. Doubts are okay, nothing wrong with that. But that's why I would ask you to ask the people, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask people who know. Rather, mashallah, we are blessed to have, ulama here, Mufti Minhaj, Mufti Azim, Mufti Izaz, and all the other teachers that are here. We have a source for we can turn to if we have some questions. So just for now, in the next few minutes, I wanted to go through the history of the compilation of the Quran. One common criticism that arises, some people say, is that, the Quran that we have today, Prophet ﷺ couldn't read, he couldn't write. So how did you get this book? He didn't write a book. So how do we get this book today? So we have to understand that the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself is taking on this responsibility, saying, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرِ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying we mean this is using the royal we. Royal we is a form of address in which, the royalty, if you go to, like the Queen of England or somewhere else, they don't say, oh, I did this, she did this, or we did this. There's one guy. There's no we. He's using the authority of the whole kingdom, said, we decree this. We, as in if you read the beginning of the Constitution, or we, the people of this, and so when you have a plurality saying something, it gives more of an authority to what they're saying. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayah is saying, نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرِ. We revealed this Qur'an. And we will protect it. نَحْنُ لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. لَحَافِظُونَ actually, if you read if you go into details, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we will definitely protect it. So how is the Quran protected? One thing you need to understand is that the Quran was written during the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is a very common misnomer. Oh, this came about later on. People wrote it, in the time of Usman radiallahu anhu. This no. You have to understand what actually happened during the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Quran was not brought down as a book, on the wings of certain angels that came down. In fact, that's one of the criticisms that the Quran itself addresses, that if it was brought down as a book from the heaven, the people would say, oh, this is some magic, this is some, somebody just made this up, so we're not gonna abide by it, we're not gonna accept it. And the style of the Quran, that it was revealed in stages. Throughout 23 years, Prophet ﷺ, the first wahi came in Ghar Hira. In fact, I would recommend the brothers who go for Hajj and Umrah, inshallah, if you get a chance, go to the Jabal Nur, the mountain of Nur, and on the top of there, in fact, go to the cave, the Ghar Hira, where the first revelation occurred. And so even now, it still has it's a feeling of sanctity that you find when you get there. In fact, it's a rock. Literally, it's a rock, but it's subhanAllah, it's like you carved a musalla into the mountain. It's like literally it's facing the Kaaba. So Prophet ﷺ, that's where he would spend his time. And no need to go too much into the details. Prophet ﷺ would go there and he would think about the world, what's happening there. That's when Jibreel came. So from there to the time he passed away, roughly 23 years, the Quran was revealed in piecemeal. Some ayats here, some surahs here. And that's what we find in the riwayat, that when the wahi came, Prophet ﷺ would have people write it down. Yes, that is true. Prophet ﷺ himself was called an ummi. Ummi means that he who could not read. Nabiyyul Ummi, the durood that we say on Fridays, after Asr, there's a special durood that we say after Friday, after Asr. If you say 80 times, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive 80 years worth of sins. That Nabiyyul Ummi, and it's mentioned in the Quran, Surah Araf. He is illiterate. Illiterate meaning that very few people at that time could read or write. And he was one of the many that could not read or write. Why is that important? Because if he was literate, if he was someone who could read or write, then the accusation could arise that he copied it from somewhere, or someone told him, or he found some book somewhere and he was just writing and he's just making up things. Or maybe he's some poet, he's just writing some things and somebody told him. So that accusation, that slander has no validity because people knew him for 40 years. That's why it took 40 years. People knew him as a Sadiq al-Amin, the truthful, the one who was trustworthy. They knew him. So when he said something, it had an effect. It had a power. This is a truthful person saying something. Yes, many people disbelieved him. They did not, agree with him, and there was many. There's a long history of what happened. But the point is that he himself was not a writer. But there were many writers there at that time. And in fact, in the books of hadith, we have a list of 40 to 48, or sometimes even over 50 sahabas who were the writers of wahi. In fact, this book called Kutab al-Wahi by Hazrat Maulana Abdul Rahim. Inshallah, I can give you the reference. But he has a book in each chapter. They're talking about those who the writers of the Wahi. Amir Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Zayd bin Sabit radiallahu anhu, the Khulafa Rashideen, many of the Ashara Mubashara, Sayyid and Zayd, these are all the katibs, the writers of the wahi. But you have to go back 1400 years. It wasn't like, you can go to Walmart and buy a pen and paper. So paper was not, how can you say, that prevalent back then. So whenever wahi came, the Prophet ﷺ would call somebody. In fact, we have this hadith in Sahih Bukhari, Hazrat Zayd bin Thabit radiyallahu anhu. He says that when this ayat was revealed, he called for me, and I was there. He said, call for Zayd. He said, when the ayat was revealed, as soon as, how was first you should understand, how did wahi come down? In fact, the second chapter of Sahih Bukhari, it describes how wahi came to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha says that once he would be sitting, and you can see that his expression changed. He became very serious. He would stop talking. He was very serious, and he would sweat. He would perspire. As if something very heavy was put on his head, and then all of a sudden, then he'd be like, he'd be fresh, and then you could tell something special had happened. That's one way the wahi came down. The second way, as I mentioned earlier, is that the Jibreel would come to him, sometime in the form of an angel, sometime in the form of a man. The very famous hadith of Jibreel, which is in all the Sahih Sitta, where the Jibreel comes and asks the Sahaba Kiram 4 questions: Mal Iman, Mal Islam, Mal Ihsan. He asks these questions. This was the Jibreel came in the form of a man. Another form of wahi is the dream. The dream of a prophet is wahi. That's why they say it's considered 1/26 of wahi. How they get that? That's a whole little explanation of that. But it's a portion of wahi, because the dreams of prophet. That's why the Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he saw himself, Ya bunayya inni ara fil manami anni adbahuka fanzur madha tara. So what did he say? Ya batif'al ma tu'mar satajuni insha'Allah min as-sabirin. What did he say? Ya, oh my son, I see you in my dream that I am sacrificing you. So that dream that he saw, it's not like our dreams, we dream about, all kinds of weird things. But the Prophet's dreams are wahi. So this is how wahi came in the Prophet ﷺ. In fact, it's a very famous hadith. When Prophet ﷺ, after Fajr, he would sometimes come and talk to the Sahaba Kiram. He would turn around and talk, and he would ask them, and you see a dream? And somebody said yes, and he would interpret the dream for them. In fact, there is a science of interpreting dreams. And that's why they say, if you do have a dream, don't just tell it to anybody. Tell it to somebody who is an expert in interpreting dreams. In fact, there's a sign. There's a whole sign of Shariat. If you see milk means ilm. If you see, how can you say, feces, bodily fluids in a stool, that's a sign of dunya. So the different things mean different things in dreams. So Prophet ﷺ once, he would talk to Sahaba, and then he told us his dreams. Yes, atani malakan laylatan barihatan. That two angels came to me and they took me on a trip. It's a very long hadith. So that hadith actually signified what happens in the Day of Judgment. So whenever wahi came, Prophet ﷺ would call for a katib. So specifically this riwayat on Zayd bin Sabit, he would ask, he called for him. He said, where is Zayd? And Zayd came, radiallahu anhu, he came and he said, I knew that whenever I was called the Prophet ﷺ, I knew this is what he wanted. So he always had some ink, and he said in this hadith, he said a shoulder blade. What is a shoulder blade? Meaning that because they didn't have paper, they would write their whatever they were told on leaves. Think of a palm tree leaf, very long and broad. Sometimes leather. Animals that have been slaughtered, the leather is left over. So on the back of that leather, they can write. Sometimes on barks of trees, and sometimes on bones. Big animals like camels and ox, so their shoulder bones and their pelvis bones, they were broad and sometimes they were clean, so that's where they wrote. So this specific hadith in Sahih Bukhari, Zayd bin Sabit says that I was called for Prophet ﷺ called me, and I brought the shoulder bone and my ink, and he said, Uktub. And then whatever he came to him, he told Hazrat Zayd right then and there. Zayd wrote it down, and then Prophet ﷺ had to send it back to him. He said, read to me what you just read, what you just wrote. And he wrote it back to him. If there's corrections that he would made, he would make the corrections. So point being, Quran was written during the time of Prophet ﷺ. In fact, all the verses of the Quran were written, not in one book form as we have today, but each wahi that came down was written by someone. But one thing which we may not understand is, well, why didn't they have books? Today we have books all over the place. Now we have e-books, and now we have all different kinds of facilities. The thing you have to understand is because of this, they didn't have the printing press. Printing press came back in the 1500s. Gutenberg, in Germany. So pre-printing press time, writing was a profession, and that had a how can you say, it took a lot of raw material. So people would write it down, but it's not like everybody could afford to have a book, everybody could have a book. So during the time Prophet ﷺ, each wahi as it came, Prophet ﷺ would read it, Sahaba Ikram would write it down. And then the main source of preservation was their intellect. Today we think, oh, these kids are wasting their time, they memorize the Quran, they don't understand what they're reading. No. This is the one of the miracles of the Quran, the living miracle of the Quran today. Yes, we can go into some of the miracles of the Quran, the proof of science in the Quran, just there are many books written on that. But one of the living miracles of the Quran is that people can memorize the Quran. Let alone, the Old Testament or the New Testament, or even maybe a few works of Shakespeare if you try memorizing it. But these kids that memorize the Quran, we're talking about, not even a letter, not even a vowel is off key. That is one of the proof of the authenticity of the Quran. So back then, many of the Arabs, they were known for their skill at memorizing, because many of them were poets, and they had memorized many poems from poets from before. In fact, they had memorized their genealogical tree, meaning Abu Bakr Siddiq was very famous for that. He knew his father, his father's fathers, and father's brothers, cousins. You knew all of that from generations on down. Not only people, they're famous for they knew the genealogy of their horses. You might think, oh, that's crazy. Why would you do that? If you know, I don't know, just last month somebody just won the Triple Crown. If you know what that means, the racing, the horse races. The horse races that are there today, even today, the very famous horses that win millions of dollars, they are very particular about who the father and the mother of a particular horse is. And they know the winner of this year's Triple Crown, his father and mother was, father and grandmother was so and so, so he won the Triple Crown back so and so, he won the Preakness, he won this, he won that. So they had this all memorized. Nowadays, we have everything on computer, we have it on database, oh, okay. But back then they were very famous for their memory. So during the time of Prophet ﷺ, that was not a major concern. They weren't concerned about, okay, maybe this will be lost, maybe this will be changed. No, because they knew there were hafizes over there. Many people had memorized the Quran. And then every year in Ramadan, as we are doing now, they would repeat the whole Quran in the specific order the Prophet ﷺ had told them. Because if an ayat came, it may be an ayat from a certain surah, maybe back, maybe a different order. So each year that order was, how can you say, clearly defined. And then in Ramadan, they would read it. In fact, the last year Prophet ﷺ, when he left, he read the whole Quran 2 times to clarify any ambiguities to the people that were there. That this is the order of the Quran that we have today, and that is the final version. When Prophet ﷺ passed away, the Ummah understood the need for having something written down. Especially after the Battle of Yamama, which is a very famous battle that came to the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhum. So what he did, this is the second stage of the compilation of the Quran. The first stage, the time of Prophet ﷺ, where each and every ayat was written, but they were not compiled together. So the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, his contribution to the collection of the Quran was he compiled each surah. And this is what Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu did, and this is, many Sahaba, what they would do is, he had Zayd bin Thabit. Actually, one time, Abu Bakr Siddiq, while he was a Khalifa, Hazrat Umar came to him. And he said, look, during this battle, that many Hufaz have died. They're shaheed. So what do we do? So Umar suggested to him, why don't you write it down? Abu Bakr Siddiq was very concerned. How can I do something the Prophet ﷺ never did during his lifetime? So anyway, they discussed it. Among the Sahaba said, yes, we should do it. That's why they appointed Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu. So his job was to accumulate the written pieces of the Quran. That's why people say, oh, the Quran was not written. No. What Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu did was that he ordered Zayd bin Thabit to accumulate the Quran. So what he did was that in front of a gathering of Sahaba Kiram, because he was a Hafiz, he was one of the key katibs of the Quran. In fact, this hadith that I shared with you is from him, Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu. So his job was he would stand up in front of a group of Sahaba Kiram, as let's say here 60, 70 people sitting here. He would say, well, who knows this ayat? Who has this ayat written down? Let's say starting from Surah Fatiha all the way to Surah Nas. And he would read it. This ayat so and so, and they would go down all the way from Surah Fatiha to Surah Alhamdulillah till to Nas. And then someone would say, okay, yes, I have this written down. I was there. Yes, my cousin was there. Okay, go get your cousin. Or my neighbor was there. Okay, who is your neighbor? Go get your neighbor. Bring him here. And that's how we have the validity of the Quran is to the level of tawatur. Tawatur is a technical term which the muhaddithin use, that the amount of people that certify the validity of this piece of knowledge is so much that it is impossible to call all of them liars. What does that mean? Is that throughout the generation, now we have printed books. In fact, especially the last stage when we get to till after the 1500s, when they started printing the books, it was much easier. But if you go back to 1500s to the time of Prophet ﷺ, in those days, very few books were printed, so they had to write them down by hand. So that's why also with the hadith, they had a group of people, let's say 100, 200,000, depending on what it was. They testify that yes, this is an ayat of the Quran. And this ayat was before this ayat and after this ayat in this surah. This is what Hazrat Zayd bin Thabit did at the time of Prophet Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. So what he did was he accumulated all the surahs, all 114 of them, he put them separate as surahs. Because some ayats, like the first beginning of the first wahi, Surah Alaq, was just the first 5 verses came. Then after that, Surah Muzammil, then Surah Fatiha, and then there were different orders. The last few verses with Alaq didn't come till later on. So when they were revealed, Prophet ﷺ told, okay, yes, these now go after the 5th verse of Surah Alaq, this is the rest. So Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu, he compiled the whole Quran, surah by surah, and he had it written down in manuscripts in one form. So basically a pile of surahs, that's what he had. And that's what he did during the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. It's 8, but let me just finish. We're almost finished, and then we'll give you time for questions. The third stage was, now the second stage of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he put the Quran in certain surahs and he had them together. And that manuscript he gave to Aisha radiallahu anha. That was passed on from him to Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. When Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu passed away, he gave it to his daughter, Hazrat Hafsa radiallahu anha. She had that group, that Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu, that whole pile of surahs that Zayd bin Thabit made, it was Hazrat Hafsa, the daughter of Umar radiallahu anhu. Then the time of Uthman radiallahu anhu, what had happened was, people had not just this one main, template. People had written their own Qurans too. And then as Quran spread, if you look at the history of Islam, the spread just within a few decades after Prophet ﷺ passed away, Islam spread from just Makkah, Medina, till all the way to Iraq, and all the way to Africa, and all the way to Palestine, all the way south to Yemen. That's a large area. And many people, different languages, different customs, as they entered into Islam, they were given, wherever he was sent people, he was sent a manuscript and a qari. You sent somebody to recite that book. But one thing you should understand is that the Quran that was written did not have any dots. As we say, yaf'alun, taf'alun, the Hafiz, you ask them, yaf'alun, taf'alun, they get messed up. Why? Because, if you look at it without the dots, it's very easy. The yaf'alun, yaqra'un, the qaf and the fa is only different, the one dot. The ya is the dots on the top and the dots on the bottom. The noon and the ba, the dots on the top, the dots in the bottom. Originally, when they were written, that original manuscript that Hazrat Zayd bin Sabit had did not have any dots. And did not have any vowels. Vowels, I'm talking about the Fatha, Kasra, Dhamma. Now that we read, the Zabar, Zayd, Pesh. Nor the Sakin, nor, the other stuff, all this came later on. So as Islam spread from Medina onwards to, let's say, Palestine, or to Cairo, or to Yemen, or to Iraq, now many more people are entering into Islam. Now as they're reading, they're not sure, is this yaf'alun or is this taf'alun? Or is this, even though they had a qari, but sometimes, is it yuf'alun or yaf'alun? There was no, how can you say, there was no vowel on top. You can read yaf'alun, yuf'alun. It's the same thing. Or taf'alun, tuf'alun. One word can be read 4 or 5 different times. Now, that you may say, well, how can you do that? But we do that also. If you realize, with the Latin languages that came later on, we have vowels in our languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, German. But the original, if you read them, you can actually, if you look at a text, you can, even without the vowels, you can still guess what conversation is going on. Like, for example, someone says, I got up in the morning and I saw the sun rising. Now, if you're writing sun, SN, without the U in the middle, you said, I saw the SN rising. You're going to assume, yes, I saw the sun rising. Not my son, but the sun rising. Or a sin rising. You didn't write a sin rising or a sand rising. No, it was the sun rising. So similarly, you can understand a lot just by the context of what you're reading. So anyway, this was what happened during the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq. When in the Uthman times, it became confusing to a lot of people. And that's where they came into a lot of different, in fact, it came to a point where some people were accusing other people of becoming disbelievers, of kafirs. Oh, why'd you do this? Why you can't read the Quran this way. In fact, if you go to Paris, in fact, alhamdulillah, when we went to the markaz in Paris, or if you go to Tunis, Morocco, when they read, somewhere, they see people say, oh, they're reading the Quran wrong. What do they read? أعوذ بالله من بسم الله الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. They don't read Maliki Yawm الدين, read Maliki Yawm الدين, because it's written Mim, Lam, Kaf. Our people say, oh, what is it? He doesn't know how to read Surah Fatiha. But no, the whole area of Jazair, Tunis, Morocco, Maghrib, in fact, many of the people in Spain and Paris, in France, that's how they read the Quran, and it's okay. In fact, that's why the Quran is in 7 different qirats, and that's a whole different topic. Maybe we'll discuss that tomorrow. But that's how, the different variations were. So Uthman radiallahu anhu, in order to cut down any misunderstandings, that's why he unified the Quran in one book. As before, it was written that, it was just the surahs were there, but the order, was not set. So Uthman radiallahu anhu had, again, Zayd bin Sabit and other prominent Sahaba Ikram, they sat down and they wrote down by hand 7, according to one riwayat, 5, according to one riwayat, 7 different mushafs of the Quran. First, they asked us, Hafsa radiallahu anha, can we see what the Abu Bakr gave to your father? And so she gave it to him, and with that as a reference, and again, they went in front of the Sahaba Ikram. Did anybody remember this, Prophet ﷺ reading this ayat in this way? And they would read the whole Quran and said, yes, they had it was the tawatur of the Sahaba Ikram, said, yes, this is how the Quran, this is what I heard. So that's when he wrote down And those 7 or 5 different Qurans were sent to different parts of the world, from Mecca to Medina to Kufa to Baghdad. And then later on, as it came to Tashkent, and then Tashkent, when the USSR came in, Uzbekistan, they took the Qurans, and now you can still find them in some libraries in Istanbul. The museum in Istanbul has one copy of those original manuscripts. So again, this is the 3rd stage. The 4th stage, we'll just go quickly, and then inshallah we'll give some time for answers. The 4th stage came in between the 3rd and the 5th. The 5th was when the printing of the Quran began. As you know, the history of printing, the Chinese made the paper, and then the Germans made the printing press, and later on in the early 1600s. So between that time, that's when these additions of the Quran that we see today. What additions? For example, you open up a book, you can see the Fatha Kasra Dhamma, the vowels that were added later on. The dots were added later on. The ayns that we use, many of the Desi Qurans, they have the ruku'. The ruku', all these came later on. And they were made by certain people at different times. There's disagreements about who made this, what. But basically, these all came later on. In fact, some of the little letters that are in the middle, sometimes you see the ta and the za, ta means stop, the qif, the waqfa lazim and the meme and the 3 dots, the mu'anaqa, all these came later on. They were not there in the time Prophet ﷺ. In the time Prophet ﷺ, there were only 3 divisions of the Quran. What were they? One was the ayat. That was certain. That ayat ar-Rahman, ayat, allam al-Quran, ayat, khalaq al-insan. These are ends of ayat. Number 2 was the surahs. They knew, all the Sahaba knew that this surah began here, it finished there. And 3rd was the manzil. In fact, I'll just end with that. Manzil, in fact, even those brothers, mashallah, that are here in itikaf, we should try doing that. What is a manzil? Manzil basically is the division of the Quran into 7 different parts. Basically, the first 3 surahs, the first manzil, and the next 5 surahs, the next 7 surahs, the 9 surahs, the 11 surahs, and the whole last 7th of the Quran, from Surah Qaf on till the end. That's the last manzil. So that's how the Sahaba Kiram usually finished one Quran in 7 days. That's how they divided the Quran. So that manzil was a way to finish the Quran in 1 week. Today, very few people, even Hafizes, very few Hafizes even do that. So anyway, after the Quran was written, then they had the vowels put on, then after the printing press came in, and then those, based on the different qira'ats, they're published, and that's what we have today. So we'll end here today, and then tomorrow we'll talk about the compilation of hadith. So we'll give you some time, inshallah, to ask questions. Any questions? Yes, brother. Depends on what time. That's a good question. The brother asked the question, did they know the order of the Quran? The Surah Fatiha came first and Surah Baqarah came first. Actually, it depends on when you are talking about. During the time of Prophet ﷺ, it depends on who became Muslim when. Like Hazrat Abu Hurairah, he didn't become Muslim till 8th Hijri. So he wasn't even there when majority of the Quran was revealed. So he just was taught, this is the Quran, this is what we know. Later on, yes, through explanations, he's also a big muhaddis, so he knew the details because he went and studied it, but many Sahaba Kiram did not. But as far as to give a reference of how do we know it was there, yes. So during the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, they made that order. And then from that time, this is through mutawatir. Mutawatir means that there have been hafizes have been reciting the Quran since Ramadan, and most of us in Ramadan, it should be throughout the whole year, but since that time till today, the Quran that we know has come in that order. Yes, brother. Hadith is a bit more complicated. We'll talk about that tomorrow. The question was about the hadith. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Actually, while we're on that topic, I just wanted to bring up, the only reason I went through this detail is because there are websites and there are books written on this topic where people are saying, oh, Hazrat Usman burnt the Quran. Now when you listen to that, so how can that be? Hazrat Usman, one of the Khulafa Rashideen, the son-in-law of Prophet ﷺ, one of the Ashara Mubashara who burned the Quran. But that is true. That is true. I said, what? Why would Hazrat Usman burn the Quran? Well, now if you listen to the whole detail, Hazrat Usman, what he burnt was the deviant writings of the Quran by other people, so that people would not have miswritten scripts of the Quran. You understand what I'm saying? Is that if someone wrote down something, I tell you something, you will write down. As Islam spread from Medina all throughout the rest of the world, people were writing. There were more people that knew how to read and write, and they wrote down what they heard. So as they wrote it down, there may have been differences with the original manuscript, what they had in Medina. So they did not want to have any, variant copies of the Quran here and there. And that's when he asked to burn. And all the Sahaba complied. In fact, Ali radiallahu anhu said, look, we were there. We gave him the mashwara. We all agreed that they should be burnt. This is not something blame on Uthman radiallahu anhu. Many people they blame Uthman for a lot of things. No, he said, Ali himself, the next Khalifa, is saying, yeah, we were there. We understood his plight. Hazrat, I forgot the name of the Sahabi. I think Musa. No, not Musa. There's another Sahabi, Amr. One Sahabi, he had been there to one of the battlefields. And when he went there, he heard other people reading the Quran. He said, where did you get this from? He said, this is from, I heard from this. He said, where did you get this from? And he went, when you traced it down, he said, look, this is, they got it down for some variant writing of the Quran. So he didn't say anything. He went back to Uthman radiallahu anhu and he explained to them, this is what's happening in the outskirts of the Ummah. And Uthman radiallahu anhu had heard this from before. That's when he had Zayd radiallahu anhu to sit down with the other Sahaba Ikram, to sit down and make the official, manuscripts. And that's when they sent out to different parts of the Ummah and they burnt all the other variant manuscripts. Yes, any other questions? Yes, brother. They were in Tashkent. I remember reading it recently. Tashkent, this is before the Russians came over. The USSR, Tashkent is Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan, now they call them the Tan countries. The Uzbekistan, the Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, the Tans. So during the time, before the Russians came in, they did have them. And then they said during the Russian time, they transported to St. Petersburg, because that was their winter headquarters. To be honest, I don't know where the other ones are. There are some references, they have some copies. If you go online, they do have some copies of the old original, you can find pictures of them, but I don't know where the others are, no. Yes, yes, brother.
In the beginning, you mentioned how we can look at ourselves and prove that Allah existed and created. Now, regarding the Quran, people say, how do we know for sure that this is from God and this is the right, this is the only right way, the Bible is not?
That's a good question. The question is the authenticity of the Quran. Maybe we'll begin with that tomorrow. I don't want to take too much time. I know it's time for du'as in a few minutes. But that's a good question. I wanted to address that, but I wanted to go through the phases first. That's a very good question. As far as the, how do I know? That's the Bible claims to be the Word of God. And the Torah and all these other people. So we should have the peace of mind with a solid foundation that yes, this, what I have in my hand is the communication from the Creator to me. Inshallah, we'll cover that in the beginning tomorrow before we talk about the hadith. Inshallah. Any other questions? Inshallah. That's fine. Yes. It started in Ramadan, yes. Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead. That I'm not sure. The last verse that was revealed according to the consensus of the ulama was in Surah Al-Baqarah, which was revealed 9 days before Prophet ﷺ passed away, which would probably be Rabiul Awwal. So it was probably not in Ramadan. It started in Ramadan, yes. The Quran, before just, in Surah Qadr, the Laylatul Qadr, أعوذ بالله من بسم الله إنا نحن نزلنا قدر ما ليلة القدر خير ما في شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح. That the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Quran from the Lawh Mahfuz to the skies here. Some people say, what does that mean? That yes, the Quran that we know as a text today, this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made in the original beginning of the creation, billions of years ago, before we were even here, before we even knew there would be a USA, before we even knew there'd be Adam alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had, the first creation was the qalam, the pen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the pen, and He told it meaning the pen, uktub. And the pen talked. The pen asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Mada aktub, what should I write? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told it to write what's going to happen till the end of time. So our whole personal history is for each individual here, every person born on the face of this planet from the beginning till the end has already been written. So part of that, which is in that Lawh Mahfuz, think of it the biggest database you could think of. Now we say the cloud has 500 billion pieces of data. This Lawh Mahfuz had way beyond that. So back then, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had the Lawh Mahfuz in this form. So then when the wahi started, when Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salam came, that came from the skies, from Lawh Mahfuz to down to this earth. And then piece by piece, as needed, throughout those 23 years, each ayat or surat was revealed at its appropriate time. That's why, one of the, you have to be careful when you read the Quran. It's very easy to misinterpret the Quran. And maybe we'll touch on that tomorrow also, is that each ayat has a background. And you have to understand the background of why and when it was revealed in order to fully understand it. So as it was needed, those verses were sent down, but the correct and final compilation was already there. And that's what was brought down. Inshallah. Yes, brother. Yes. Right. Before they came down, it was just the, he was sick. So we know it's at the end of Surah Baqarah, I forgot it's 170 something verse, I don't remember off the top of my head. But the Sahaba, when it was revealed, Prophet ﷺ told the Sahaba that this ayat just came down, and he said this ayat goes in Surah Baqarah at this place. So that's when it was finalized. But yes, so during the last Ramadan, he read it 2 times, whatever was there at that time. Yes, a lot of time people also give this, there's also a very famous saying that the verse of Surah Ma'idah, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa raditu lakum al-Islam dinan, that today I have perfected your religion, that is supposed to be the last ayat of the Quran. Yes, that was the last ayat that was revealed with ahkamat. Ahkamat meaning as far as the do's and the don'ts, that was revealed in the Hajj, in front of the Arafat, with all in front of everybody. That was the final, the last ayat was revealed, the Surah Ma'idah ayat. But this ayat was actual, in as far as the timeline, was the last who was revealed a few days before Prophet ﷺ passed away. Yes. Inshallah, any questions we could talk personally. We'll give you time for du'as, inshallah, and then we'll start again tomorrow, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah. Again, I think the administration was saying that let's make du'as, and then when it's time, they will call us down, inshallah, for the iftar, inshallah. Jazakallah.
Please start making your way down in the next 4 minutes for iftar.